Hello and welcome to the final part in this countdown of the top 50 QPR players of all time. This is it. After months of voting and a month of podcasts, we reached the final 10, the ultimate 10 QPR legends from across the ages. I'm James, I run Hoops and Dreams, and as you can see, I'm joined again by Steve and Tony, and they'll cast their eye and share their opinions on these top 10. I won't go over again how the list was formed. There's a link in the video description that can take you to our forum, which will explain it. But it's worth repeating that it's been formed by votes from hundreds of QPR fans. It's not one person's lists. And here we go then. I won't keep you waiting any longer. The top 10. And a top 10 that starts with the man who scored the goal to take us to our only FA Cup final in 1982. And that is Clive Allen. 157 appearances, 83 goals, a goal every 1.9 games, what we would do for a striker with that strike rate now. Another striker who potentially from external people is maybe associated with other clubs more than QPR, but obviously he's made the top 10 of QPR players, so he's still obviously a lot of love for him amongst the QPR fan base. Where do you stand, Tony? A lot of love from you?
Absolutely. In his first spell, in his first couple of seasons at the club, his goal scoring record was just ridiculous. In fact, I remember I saw his first full game for the club. So it was the end of the season when we were relegated. That great team had broken up, and he came in as a youngster for his first full match. It was against Coventry, and he scored a hat-trick. We won 5-1. And I remember kind of thinking, well, I was absolutely gutted. I was a teenager, absolutely gutted that we were relegated, but kind of that sort of thought, whoa, well, this looks quite exciting for going forward. And he had this partnership with Paul Goddard, who I'm kind of surprised was nowhere on this list. And they had this incredible understanding. I think they'd come through the youth teams together or whatever. And I think in our first season back in the second division, they scored some ridiculous number of goals as a partnership, the two of them. But he was just an unbelievable goal scorer. He scored goals everywhere he went. Fantastic player.
He was a tremendous player, Clive Allen. He came through our youth ranks. And as Tony was saying, he was so prolific in that very first spell. For Rangers, he was tremendous. It seemed every time he got the ball, it was in the back of the net. It was sad that we sold him at the time to Palace, and even weirder that Palace never played him before they offloaded him to I think went to Arsenal at the time. But a tremendous player, and he definitely deserves his place in the top 10 of QPR greats.
Yeah, I've said on one of the previous parts how I had a golden goals QPR video, and one of my favourite QPR goals is a Clive Allen goal where he does like a drag back and then another drag back and then slides it in. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing goal. Like if one of the players like Salah or whoever, Mahrez or someone scored that in the Premier League these days, they'd be talking about it for years, wouldn't they? It was an outstanding goal. And there he is, number 10, Clive Allen, to start the top 10. Number 9 is my biggest surprise of the people who are in the top 10. I'm not saying he's not a QPR legend, but I'll need some explanation from you two as why he's quite so high. Number 9 is Paul Parker, 160 appearances, 1 goal. Now, it's just why is he ahead of the likes of Clint Hill, Terry Fenwick, Glenn Roeder, Clive Wilson, David Bardsey, all these defenders? This Paul Parker had 4 years at the club. Number 9, Steve. Is it right?
No, you're right. I had him at number 19. I couldn't understand. I have to say, I always thought Dave Clement was our best right back, but to see Paul Parker as our best right back, I didn't quite agree with that one. But he was a good, solid right back. He was a tremendous player. I remember us signing him at the time from Fulham. Luckily, we sold him on later on for a profit to Man United. But it proved what a good player he was, because I think he won the championship under Ferguson at Man United. But for me, he was, no, I wouldn't have had him in my top 10, but he was a good, solid right back.
Any difference of opinion, Tony?
No, I agree. I had him number 19. He was a really good player, and and he played in good level. He played a lot of his matches actually as a centre back, which was quite amazing because he wasn't very tall, but I don't know. He was pretty quick, so maybe he made up for it like that. But he was a very effective centre back as well. Of course, he played in a World Cup. So he was a top player, but he wasn't with us all that long. And I would have said there one or two others probably more deserving of a top 10 berth.
Yeah, well, the voting system that we used, like I said, was a head-to-head, wasn't it? So it would have said Paul Parker or this person, this Paul Parker or this person. And in all the rounds, he was consistently in the top 10. So obviously a lot of people out there who must have very, very fond memories of him. And there he is, number 9, Paul Parker. Number 8 is the man with no shin pads. 220 appearances, 34 goals, and of course that is Dave Thomas. I always remember on the old forum there used to be a member called Dave Thomas's Socks. Always used to make me laugh.
That's right.
Yeah. His transfer in October 1972 from Burnley to QPR was a record feat at the time for the second division club. Spent 5 years at QPR. Like I say, 220 appearances. Tony, number 8. Where do you stand on him?
I think I had him even higher. He was fantastic player. He was, he was a proper winger of the old school. He just take fullbacks on and just make them, just have them for breakfast. He was, and he also actually, mostly he was absolutely to the byline, play across, but he also could cut in and scored some pretty spectacular shots from the edge of the penalty area as well. He was, fantastic player. And of course, he was part of that great team. Probably created countless chances for the likes of Gibbons and Bowles and Francis. He was fantastic to watch. It's one of the best things in football, watching a winger take on the fullback, get past, get to the byline, get a crossing, and he was fantastic.
Yeah, I reiterate everything that Tony said there. He was a cracking winger, and I had him at number 4 in my list. I had him a lot higher, but he was another one of those players in a team that included players that would get you out of their seats. He was one that when he got the ball, the crowd knew that something was about to happen, and when he was going up the wing, it was brilliant. And he was a top player.
Yeah, he's definitely, I said it on a few of these, obviously, I wish I could have seen him play. He's one of those, when my dad talks about him, hearing you two then talking about him, he's just someone who you wish you could have seen play, Harry. Like just so attacking, and probably no defensive bone in his body, but that's no problem.
No.
Number 8, Dave Thomas. Talking of exciting attacking players, number 7 is our championship-winning captain, the talismanic and temperamental Moroccan, Adel Taarabt. Wow. I mean, the word for me is just wow. What a player. I was actually watching the 2010-11 DVD with my little boy recently, because that's how we spend our evenings. And it's just pure genius watching him. It's easy to forget just quite how good he was that season. There's moments that you remember, but then there's just odd little matches against Crystal Palace here and some Doncaster there or whatever, and he's just doing unbelievable things in every single game. And it's no surprise to me that he's number 7 on the list, because in terms of ability wise, what a player. There's not enough superlatives really to describe how good he could be. It's just always got that facet, or whatever word you want to use, that he couldn't sustain it for a longer period of time, isn't it, with QPR? He's number 7, and he only really performed for one whole season, with fleeting moments here and there. Imagine what number he could have been if he could have knuckled down and been at QPR for 5-10 years. And it's one of those things that we'll never know, but I wish we could know. Steve, Adel Taarabt, number 7.
Yeah. didn't have him that high. I had him down at number 13 in my list. And I think he was a bit of a one-hit wonder. He had that one season when he was brilliant. And I've said it before, he only produced in the Championship. When they tried to put him up, when we went into the Premiership, he just either couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. And that was the thing for Adele. You saw him on the days he wanted to play, he could be unplayable. But on the days when he just didn't want to know. I always remember the day when he wanted to walk off at one stage in one game. I think, was it against Fulham?
Yeah, the bus home tale.
The bus home, yeah.
I mean, he just was so temperamental. And but yeah, as you say, James, on his day, unplayable, brilliant. There weren't enough superlatives to describe him. But again, he never did it for me at the top level. And really, to be in the top 10 here, I think I'd like to have seen players that did it in Division 1 or in the Premiership. And Adele, for me, I'm probably going to get castigated for this, but I think he was overrated.
Yeah, he wasn't in my top 10 either, and purely because he didn't do it for long enough. I mean, that was the thing. I mean, and as Steve said, not at the top level. I mean, listen, the guy could do stuff with a football that you just wouldn't even imagine. He was just, when he was on song, the stuff he could do was just ridiculous. Funny enough, I mean, he scored ridiculously spectacular goals, but the one moment that I'll remember was actually an assist he did for Wayne Routledge, where he just made this pass. He was kind of hemmed in on the touchline, and he just the pass. I mean,
it was Coventry, wasn't it? Like I said, I've just been watching the DVD the last couple, outside of his boot, and it was all Routledge had to do was control it and beat the keeper.
Yeah. I mean, that pass, just the. So never mind all the all the dribbling, round players are making them look stupid, the nutmegs, the shots, but the passes, the vision. I mean, he, if he'd wanted it, he really did have it all, and I think he could have been, absolute club legend, the next number 10, the next Sam Bowles or whatever. But I think his biggest problem was in his head.
Yeah.
And what a pity.
Yeah, it'll always be a frustration to probably all QPR fans that he, like I said at the start, that he couldn't knuckle down and become the player that he could have been. Because I know now he plays for Benfica, he plays in the Champions League and so on and so forth. But as a central midfielder, and it's all very odd, he kind of went into the wilderness for a few years, and he should have still been at QPR now, even now, however old he is, 33 or something like that. But yeah. Adel Taarabt, number 7, 164 appearances, 34 goals in total it was for Adel. Number 6 is the oldest player to have ever appeared for QPR when he last appeared. Adored by a lot of QPR fans. We still have a member on our forum now, Ask QPR, who has Ray Wilkins as his little avatar profile picture. And that is Ray Wilkins. 207 appearances, 10 goals. 6-year spell at QPR as a player, a less successful stint as a manager. Ray Wilkins, Tony.
And I'm with Ash QPR on that. I mean, he joined us. I mean, he was already well into his 30s. You said he was the oldest player to play for us. How old was he in his last match? 39, 40?
39, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. And he, I don't know. He just seemed to be in a different time zone to the rest of us. He just strolled around. He just played these incredible passes. He basically controlled the pitch, and he made the team tick. He was just, I mean, we talk about, I don't know, Charlie Austin being finished at 32 or whatever he is, 31 even. And Ray Wilkins was 33 and he was only getting started. He was just insanely good. And and that was at top level as well.
Yeah. I think the thing with Ray Wilkins, when he came to us, he had spells abroad. and the way they played football and kept their bodies going. And we've learned from it these days, but their fitness regimes and what they ate allowed the foreign players back in the day to go on a lot longer. And I think that's where Ray Wilkins benefited. And I think he brought that to QPR. And I think it was a brilliant signing at the time from Glasgow Rangers when they got him, because his experience was what we needed. And he was, we got him at the end of his career, but what a tremendous signing. And it's, as you were saying, the fact that so many people still hold him so highly, even though he played for Chelsea, says something about the man, doesn't it? And the fact he was like me, we were both Hillingdon boys, makes it even better.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of... So good. Go on, Tony.
Yeah, all I was going to say is that everyone you ever hear interviewed who talks about him, also, as well as the kind of quality, says he's the nicest guy you've ever met. So
probably his downfall as a manager, though, wasn't it? Perhaps that as well, though.
Yeah. I mean it didn't work. Although, he was a little bit unlucky because obviously he had to tell Les Ferdinand and break up the team, and his sacking was a bit strange because he was still manager at the beginning of the next season. We made this great start, and then he got sacked. Season had hardly started, so very strange.
Yeah, he's one of those players, what you were saying there, Tony, how he seemed to see a different match to everyone else on the pitch. So it didn't matter what his age was. He was such an intelligent footballer in every clip I've ever seen of him. Yeah. Literally, the vision, what was going on in his head was just unbelievable. What a player, from what I've seen. Number 6, Ray Wilkins. Number 5, I'm actually going to say here that the voting here, because this is where people are going to go, how is that person this, here, and here? We had 44,000 head-to-head votes. So when you put this person against the top 4, he came out 5th more, because I know some people are going to say that he should be number 2. Number 5 is Rodney Marsh. 242 appearances, 134 goals. Like I say, he was never in contention in the voting for the top 2 or 3. He was always around 4th or 5th, ended up 5th. He's the entry who's furthest back in time of anybody in the top 10. 6 years at QPR from 1966 to 1972. 44 goals in a single season at QPR, including being the last player to score 30 league goals in a season for QPR 55 years ago. And hopefully that wait won't go on too much longer. Steve, Rodney Marsh, where do you put him?
Yeah, I didn't have him as high as 5. I know that might surprise a few, but I had him down at number 10. A bit like Adel Taarabt. Rodney lived on the fact that he was great in the 2nd division for us, and because he was part of the League Cup winning team, scoring the 2nd goal. And he was brilliant. He was brilliant on his day. I saw him score a hat-trick away at Birmingham. And he had loads of flair. But I think Rodney kept a little bit back for himself. And I never thought he did well. He was good at QPR, and he was, and he got sold. But again, he played better for Man City, I thought, after he left us. I had him down at number 10, Rodney, and I know that may upset a few people.
I actually had him at number 5, so there you go. I like you, James, I thought he'd be in the top 2 or 3. And I suppose it's 50 years since he left the club. So, I guess if if we had a few people in their sort of 80s and 90s on the forum, he might have done a bit better. When I first started supporting QPR was Rodney Marsh, pretty much. He was that dominant a character in the team. He was ridiculously skillful. He scored some spectacular goals, including the one in the League Cup final. But he also, he was also quite a big, strong guy. He scored a lot of headers. He was absolutely stunning in those kind of 3rd division, 2nd division years. We'll never really know how good he would have been in the first division because he missed most of that season through injury. He was so much was he Mr. QPR that when he was sold in 1972, a whole bunch of QPR fans went up to watch him at Man City instead of watching QPR. Yeah, incredible. But true, although bizarrely, from the day we sold him, he went on this amazing unbeaten run. So, it's strange.
Yeah, I mean, it is an amazing record. He's got 134 goals. And like I say, it's going to be a long time probably before we have someone getting 30 league goals in a season again. It could be the time. And a lot, like I say, it's just, you get the odd comment already on our forum, and I'm sure some people will be posting after they watch this saying, how is he number 5? But I just have to say, again, in the voting, it was not close. He was very much in the top 5, but not close to the higher numbers. And when you see obviously the top 4, which I'm sure a lot of people can guess, it's not unfair that those people are ahead of him. Number 5, Rodney Marsh. Number 4 is a man who's just often referred to as Mr. QPR. 14-year career from his first to his last appearance. 483 appearances, 18 goals, and that's Alan McDonald. The most capped QPR player with 52 Northern Ireland appearances whilst he was at QPR. Actually 10 years, obviously, since his death this year. And my memory of Alan McDonald was he was obviously the captain and the main defender when I was first supporting QPR. And I remember I used to play as a centre-back, and my dad was always telling me to watch Alan McDonald, watch how he held on to the defender's shirt at corners where the referee couldn't see him, and giving me all these little dark arts that Alan McDonald would be up to. And I used to literally spend most of my match just watching Alan McDonald. The match is going on and I'm watching what he was doing. So number 4, Tony, Alan McDonald.
Yeah, I mean, he was a fantastic centre-half and obviously fantastic longevity at QPR. Funny enough, I was reading an interview with him today, and he was asked who his toughest opponent was. And he said he really used to enjoy playing against Mark Hughes because they were both kind of tough, uncompromising, a bit of a battle. And they both kind of would, really be going at it. But, neither of them would complain when they got a hit, but they'd both fight and fight and fight. And that's the sort of character he was, really. He was a big, tough centre-half. You really wouldn't want to be a centre-forward facing him. And, and he was kept that kind of quality going forever. And, Mr. QPR, that's what he was for 15 years.
An uncompromising defender, and he will always be remembered as being, as Tony said, Mr. QPR, because he was with us for the majority of his career. I think he did return later on as an assistant manager at one stage, but what a player. He was so reliable in that centre-half position. And what more can I say? I just reiterate everything that Tony said.
He seemed like a really amazing character as well. I've seen some old clips on YouTube of QPR on game shows and random things, and Alan McDonald, he seems like a real joker, and I can imagine he was an amazing influence in the dressing room and for younger players and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think that he was a man of his era. So we talked about kind of maybe we haven't yet, but we will, about Mavericks in the 70s and 80s, and I think he probably wasn't the cleanest living individual. I think he was a proper character who lived properly, played properly, and and that just makes him even more lovable as a guy.
He was what every team needed. He was a leader. He was the guy that the other players all looked to, and because of that fact, it was like you said earlier. He introduced some of those dark arts, and that was the days when you could get away with some of the dark arts. But a tremendous guy.
Yeah, from what I witnessed as a child, he'd be having a nightmare with VAR. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It'd be a penalty at every corner for the opposition. Number 4, Alan McDonald. So number 3, we're here, the bronze medal position. And it's a club captain, an England captain before the age of 24. And that's, of course, Jerry Francis. 352 appearances for QPR, 65 goals. Another midfielder who became a manager, which was a bit of a theme in this top 50 as a whole. He was the manager when I first started going to QPR. So it's hard for me to comment on him as a player. But I would say from all the clips I've seen, to me, of all the players, I think he's the best all-round QPR player that there's ever been. Whether that's right or wrong, but that's what I've seen from clips. Steve, am I right or wrong?
Definitely, yeah. He was number 2 in my list. He's the best captain and leader that we ever had, and the fact he went on to captain England proved just what a good player he was. And he was the guy that, and we're going to obviously talk about Mr. Bowles later, but he was the guy that made Mr. Bowles tick. And Jerry Francis was tremendous. And the fact he went on to also manage us years later, it was a shame that he was tarnished a bit, because he would come back as a manager for a second time, and he wasn't quite as successful. But no, as a player, he was tremendous. And I always remember the game, well, when he was England captain and we tore Scotland apart at Wembley, at the old Wembley, and it was 5-1. And I think Jerry bagged a couple on the day. Tremendous play. He was QPR through and through as well. Can't talk highly of enough of him, really. He has to be in the top. He'd have to be in the top 3 of any QPR greatest players.
Yeah, absolutely agree. He was a fantastic player, kind of an attacking midfielder. He was, you'd love to have someone like that in your team today. He was just a fantastic player. And in fact, funnily enough, his England career, as I remember, was cut short because he had a chronic back condition.
He did.
So he'd have played more times for England and had more success. But he was just, he had this, in fact, he talks about it a lot, this kind of telepathic understanding he had with Stan Bowles that made that team tick. Fantastic player. And actually, certainly in his first spell, fantastic manager as well. That team in his first spell as manager was, not far short of the great team in the 70s.
That's right.
And fantastic. Another Mr. QPR, really.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you add up his appearances as a player and then the amount of games he took charge of QPR as a manager in both his spells, I think he's probably the ultimate QPR legend if you added all that together. It must be an unbelievable amount. You're probably talking 700, 800 games that he was player manager at the club for. It's quite unbelievable. And very, very deserving of his position. As number 3, Jerry Francis. Number 2 is striker. And it's not Stan Bowles. As you can now guess, it is Les Ferdinand. Now, even my wife, when I was telling her about this list, she was like, Les Ferdinand's number 2. And I was like, well, it's not my list. So he was very much clear number 2. In the first round of voting that we did, he actually won his group by a greater margin than Stan Bowles, obviously, is our number 1, as you can now guess. He actually won his group by a greater margin than what Stan Bowles did. As we went into the later groups and they came head to head, it was only Stan Bowles that beat Les Ferdinand in the voting. He was very, very, very popular amongst the demographic of QPR fans. Obviously, he was the only player to score 20 plus league goals in 2 seasons in the last 50 years. Has the club ever truly recovered from him being sold in 1995? That's another question. Is he right to be number 2, Tony?
Well, he was just outside the top 3 on my list, but I'm old. And but he was a fantastic, but he'd probably still be our best centre forward if he played now. He was in some ways the perfect centre forward. So he had pace, He scored fantastic goals from outside the penalty area. He was an unbelievable header of the ball. I mean, he seemed to hang in there. He's obviously got a stunning scoring record, 1 and 2. And obviously you saw what happened when we eventually had to sell him. Interestingly, he was a little bit of a late developer. I remember seeing him in his early years where he just didn't quite have it. And, he was a bit kind of, because he went to Turkey for a few years for a loan, and I think that helped him a lot. I remember one of his early games away at Luton. I think he scored both goals. So he wasn't an immediate hit. It took him a little while, but he was a fantastic player. He was really the complete centre forward. He had speed, he had power, he had how everyone says about Charlie Austin, he always knows where to be at the right time. Les had that as well. He was a top centre forward.
He was. He wasn't that tall, but as Tony said, he had that ability to defy gravity and just hang in the air. And that was what he scored so many goals from set pieces and corners, and when the ball was played in with headers. And I always remember he loved scoring against Everton. He must have wanted to play against Everton every week because and Everton must have hated playing against Les Ferdinand because he just had an uncanny record of when he played against them, whether it was at Loftus Road or at Goodison Park, he would score. Brilliant player. He was an absolute, and he was the fact he came up through the ranks, and as Tony said, he went off to Turkey, and he had a bit of a hard time getting into the team, but he proves that sometimes that's what these players need. They learn their trade in the abroad or in the lower leagues. They come through, and Ferdinand proved that you can go on to be an England international and a big money signing for another club. Tremendous player.
I didn't say it before, but he had 183 appearances, 90 goals. And I say there about him when he got sold in 1995 as the club ever recovered, and obviously in a couple of years that'll be 30 years ago, and we've never got back to those heights, have we? So I think it shows you how important he was and how good he was at that point, that QPR were kind of at their Premier League peak with him, and we've never ever either replaced him or got back to that level without him. He actually scored my first ever QPR goal at a match. It was absolutely amazing free kick for about 30 yards, but we still lost the match 4-1. So I should have ran away then, shouldn't I? And rather than still being sat here, instead of still being sat here talking about it all these years on. But number 2.
I just hope. I'm going to say just before we move on, I just hope that he isn't tarnished by the fact he's now our director of football, and it's never good. I never like players who are sort of like legends coming back, doing other jobs like manager and director of football, because it can tarnish their reputation. And I hope it doesn't, but as a player, tremendous.
It doesn't seem to be doing him any harm at the moment because he's obviously still very, very popular, but I do think a few fans think his head's on the block if this next managerial appointment doesn't go well. Then.
I think that's right. But it's a tough old job at a club like ours. That's all.
Yeah. I don't envy him that, but what a striker back in the day. Number 2, Les Ferdinand. And of course, you've all worked out who the gold medal QPR player is. Number 1, Mr. Stanley Bowles. Of course, just had the stadium stand named after him. Looks very good, I have to say. Some fans saying it shouldn't be Stanley Bowles. He's still come out as number 1 in this vote. It was closer, like I mentioned before. It wasn't like he was a runaway winner. And I think sometimes people think they have to put Stan Bowles as number 1. But on average, in our voting system, he came out on top more than any other player. 315 appearances, 96 goals. Amazing fact that he was never a sub for QPR. So it shows you how good he was. He was always a starter. He never, ever came on as a sub. Or did they even have subs in those days? Maybe I'm getting something wrong with the stat there, but that's what I saw.
Yeah, they did. They were subs then.
Like I say, it was a little bit closer. I'll hand straight over to Steve. Stan Bowles.
Well, he'll be forever be my legend. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I think it was 50 years ago this September that he made his debut for the club. But what a player, what a character. He was, if anyone mentions QPR and they could be a supporter of any club, they'll always mention Stan Bowles. He is the biggest player or the legend for QPR. And when he was on the pitch, I mean, he's understanding with Jerry Francis was absolutely superb. And he was the guy who got fans out of their seats, and he had us all, just admiring his ability. And he had tremendous ability and the stories that go with him, because he was known for his turning up at the game sort of like 15 minutes before kickoff after coming out of the White City and watching the Greyhounds. And then, he'd go and want to take a corner and go and ask someone who had won the 3 o'clock at Newbury or somewhere. A real character. And I always remember the game at Sunderland in '73 after they'd won the cup, when he nearly started a riot up there when they put the FA Cup on a plinth and he was trying to knock it off. He was taking pot shots at the FA Cup. And then not only that, I think we won the match that day 3-1. And Bowles, for the second one, he took it around Montgomery, the old Sunderland goalkeeper, then didn't put the ball immediately in the net, messed around with it on the line to get Montgomery to come back at him before he put it in the net, whereupon the Sunderland fans all had led to a pitch invasion. What he was a character, a real character, and some of the other stories about him. Brilliant, lovely guy, and I think what an honour for him that we've named a stand after him.
Yeah. I mean, he was I agree with all that. He was my number one, and he was always going to be my number one. And I would have been absolutely shocked if he wasn't number one in the, even though it's all that time ago. I think with Stan Bowles, you can look at dispassionately at what he was as a player, and he was amazing. He had unbelievable close control. He'd go round players. He'd make them look like fools. He scored quite a lot of goals, although that wasn't his main thing. What is he, 1 in 3? That's pretty good. And I remember when we had that great run in the UEFA Cup, I think he broke the scoring record for one season in Europe. He got 11 goals or something. But he scored goals. But I think the thing that makes him so special was the way he did it. So he had that kind of he had that cheeky grin. He loved kind of making defenders kind of look stupid. He kind of go a bit in the way that Adel Trab did as well. Similar sort of idea, and actually also similar to Adel Trab. He kind of had a self-destructive streak, but in his case, you never saw it on the pitch. So whatever was going on in his life, and there was always crazy stuff going on in his life, 3 o'clock Saturday afternoon, he was there and he put on a performance and without fail. And, I mean, as Steve said, the stories. I think one of the reasons he worked so well at QPR was the club actually loved him. I think Jim Gregory, the chairman, loved him and let him get away with murder that no one else would have got away with. And the club really looked after him, in all sorts of ways. And so it was just a kind of the right man at the right place at the right time. And he was the stardust in that team, basically.
He was. And he did it in the days when the pitches were mud heaps and the defenders who were marking him would tackle him around his waist. So it wasn't like today when you're playing on a billiard pitch. It was absolutely mud heaps. And players like Ron Harris and Tommy Smith, they used to come in at you, and they'd be taking you waist high. So the fact he survived and he scored goals at that time, brilliant, tremendous guy. But he was always into a little scheme, wasn't he? Do you remember that, Tony, when he was sponsored, I think, by Gola, and then Adidas offered him money as well to wear their boots. So Gola had sponsored him to wear their boots. And Stan, being pretty cute as he was, he decided to get money out of both of them and wore one boot, one of Gola's, the Gola boot on one foot and an Adidas boot on the other. Fantastic guy, fantastic stories about him, and he was skillful to go with it.
And actually, he's also a kind of very much kind of man of the people. I think. I mean, I was probably too young, but people would talk about kind of drinking with him in the local pubs. And in fact, when I went to the playoff final, the guy I was sat next to was absolutely thrilled because he just bumped into Stan Bowles coming out of Wembley Park Station, walking down towards the stadium. And he walked down with him and was chatting with him, and they had photos together. And that was just him. I mean, he just, none of the kind of VIP treatment. He was just in amongst everyone else.
He was, yeah. I think that's what made him so popular, didn't it? He was a guy. He was of the people, wasn't he? He was there. He was one of the fans, and he, not only did he create excitement, but he wasn't standoffish. He was the guy you could go and talk to him, and that's what made him so good. Bit different maybe to some of today's players, where they're cocooned and kept away from the fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're saying that story. My dad's told me those stories, how he'd be turning up at 2:45 and Stan Bowles is walking into the stadium at the same time. The fans would love that, and it never happened today, would it, with the regimes and things they have these days? And I think it will be a long time before he's probably ever displaced on any QPR list. Like I said, the votes were relatively close, but he's got the stand named after him. His legacy definitely continues. My little boy knows that if he's playing with his QPR cards, the one you want is the Stan Bowles one. That's the highest ranked one that made him. I remember when I was growing up, I got a kick up the arse, and it came with a Stan Bowles poster that said, "My 7 years at QPR mean more to me than my time at the other clubs put together." And I had that up in my bedroom. So my generation knew he was the number one. And I think the next generation will, obviously with the stand now, will know that he's the number one. It's like, it will be a long time before he's not the number one. I mean, think of how good a player is going to have to be over a period of time for QPR to become a number one above Stan Bowles. That's what I think as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably it. I mean, if Les Ferdinand couldn't do it, then it's going to take some player to do it.
Exactly. Because even like some of the names that we've mentioned in the list, if he'd stayed at QPR and made 500 appearances, would he still have come to play Stan Bowles? You're going to have to be unbelievable to knock Stan Bowles off the number one spot. Number one, Stan Lee Bowles. And that concludes our list. Now that there can be no spoilers, I know that a few people have actually asked me who are the people who were just outside the top 50. So I'll just go over that very quickly. A very definite 51 was Jan Stejskal. He kept coming exactly outside the top 50. He was pretty much ahead of everyone else, but as soon as he came up against anyone in the top 50, he would be 51. And then 10 names of the players who were not included in this top 50 countdown, but they actually got 50% of the votes or more in their original groups. They just fell later in the rounds as the votes got harder against the other players who were doing well. And that's Mark Lazarus, Wayne Faraday, John Gregory, Darren Peacock, Jamie Mackey, Mike Keane, Brian Bedford, Trevor Francis, Heide Helgeson, and Peter Hooker. They were very much the names that were just outside the top 50. Obviously, if you've not watched the first 4 parts of this countdown, 50 up to number 11, go back and check them out. We just talked through those names. Amazing memories, amazing players. And that's it. The top 50 QPR players of all time. Thank you both, Steve and Tony, for outstanding contributions across the 5 parts. I hope everybody has enjoyed listening to you as much as I have. I cannot thank you, the viewers, enough for watching. Subscribe to our channel if you can. There's a link in the description as well that will take you through to our free QPR forum, our message board where you can discuss this top 50, play our QPR prediction games in the new season. Join us. We'd love to have you, see what you have to say about QPR. We are Hoops and Dreams. This was the top 50 QPR players of all time. Congratulations to Stan Bowles. Come on, you R's.
You know who we are. You know who we are. We are QPR.